Hi, I'm Peggy Farren. Welcome to the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Hey, we're going to be talking about bird photography, but before you tune yourselves out, Ray Hennessy is going to talk to us about creative bird photography, not just the same old stuff, so stay tuned. The Understand Photography Show is a podcast, so please listen to us on iTunes or Spotify, however you listen to your podcasts. And if you would, we'd really appreciate it if you leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us so much. It makes us come up in the search engines better. We also put the behind the scenes on YouTube, and we have a Facebook watch party every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So come and watch with me. I mean, we don't do much. There's no visuals, but you know, there we are talking. Anyway, our signature course here at Understand Photography is the 4 Weeks to Proficiency in Photography, and that is a 4-week online course, but it's interactive. It's not just here's a course. You actually have an instructor, me, and you are going to have homework so that whatever we teach you, you're really going to learn, okay? Our motto at Understand Photography is we simplify the technical. So if you're the kind of person who needs to be shown like this, that, and the other thing on your particular camera. So if you have a Canon, you have a Fuji, you have a Nikon, whatever kind of camera you have, you're gonna see like which button to push, which dial to turn. First class, we're gonna teach you to shoot in the manual mode. Once you learn that, everything becomes easier. 4 Weeks to Proficiency in Photography. Check out our website at understandphotography.com to see the next start date. Okay, so Ray Hennessy is a workshop instructor, a podcaster, wildlife and bird photography, and he creates incredible compositions with natural lights. He has a book series called Birds of Color. His podcast is called Wildlife Photo Chat. So welcome, Ray.
Thanks so much for having me, Peggy.
Now, you just told me that you have been a full-time photographer for 20 years,
Yes.
and you look like a child to me.
Yeah, can you believe that?
So tell me that story.
Yeah, so right out of high school, I got my first photography job working at a wedding and portrait studio. They did high school senior portraits and weddings, and it was all film at the time, you know. So I got to learn wedding photography on Hasselblads and that sort of thing. And they hired me actually because I knew Photoshop really well, and they had gotten their first digital camera, which was so unbelievably different at the time compared to what we shoot now, you know?
20 years ago?
Yeah, in 1999.
What
so
kind
they had
of digital camera
a Kodak,
was?
I think the model was a 520, a $12,000 2 megapixel camera. Could you imagine, you know? Yeah. So they didn't know Photoshop really well. I was actually good at that, and that was why I started working there. I started kind of heading up their digital department and kind of grew from there. And so I learned wedding photography and portrait photography with them, and kind of, you know, grew that studio into the digital era, which was really neat.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have to tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
When my son, he was 19, well actually I think his I can't remember, but anyway, well, his buddy started working for me.
Okay.
And he took Photoshop in high school.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
if you talk to him today, he still says, I taught her everything she knows about Photoshop, which he did teach me a lot.
Yeah,
He knew a lot. I
yeah.
mean, I think he was 16, 17
Sure.
when he started working for me.
Yeah.
But everything was new back then, but that
Yep.
wasn't 20 years ago. That was, well, it was 2001.
Okay. Yeah, so
So,
close.
yeah.
You know, yeah, it was
Has it been-
1999 when I started
God,
there.
it's
Yeah.
been 19 years since 2001.
It goes quick, right?
I'm getting too old. It
Yeah,
goes like this.
yeah.
So how did you get into bird photography?
So from there, I went to work I left that studio, I forget when, I maybe worked there for like 8 years. I went to work for an architect photographer in Philadelphia. That's all they did was photograph buildings, interiors, exteriors, and again, I didn't shoot much for them, but all I did was the Photoshop stuff. But while I was there, my wife at the time and I started we started our own wedding photography business, and so we ran that for 10 years. But in 2006, my dad got into, he'd been a photographer forever, and he got his first digital camera and started shooting birds in the backyard. And then it started branching out. He was going to the nearby, there was a national wildlife refuge like within an hour from us that was real popular, and he started going there and I started joining him. And so we grew up hunting and fishing, always outdoors. So this was another way, we had kind of stopped most of that, and this was another way to kind of connect with nature.
And with your dad.
And with my dad, yeah.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, so he kind of got into it, and then I kind of followed suit a little bit, and then that was, I mean, as soon as I started getting into it, I was hooked. You know, I totally was. Yeah.
It's funny because I started off as a wedding photographer and got into portraits, although I never really got into architectural photography. But when I started doing the nature photography, at first I was a little bored, I have to tell you.
Yeah.
But then I started getting into it. Now, I never dreamed, I'm from Detroit, I never dreamed in a million years I'd be out hiking in the swamp.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, never in a million years would I have
funny.
believed that, but here I am.
Yeah, exactly. It draws certain people, I think, you know? Yeah.
Well, it does something to you.
It does.
Like you said, you get hooked.
Yeah, I really was, yeah.
So, all right, so how do you keep from getting bored with photographing birds? I mean, birds. I mean, you know.
So for me, it's birds. They fascinate me anyway. Even from when I was younger, I always had kind of a connection and a fascination with them. But to keep from getting bored, for me, it's always trying to do something different.
Okay.
You know, really seeking out a different creative way of photographing them. In the past couple of years, I've really been trying to concentrate on capturing behavior, which is so much more difficult than just a portrait. And it requires a ton of time. But with a ton of time in the field, you actually start to get to learn more about these birds and get to experience them acting natural and, you know, displaying some of these unique behaviors and that sort of thing, kind of almost like an inside view into their world, you know, instead of just, you know, here's a bird, let me take a portrait and then kind of move on from there.
Well, it's funny, I learned that from my bird feeder. I put a bird feeder out right outside my desk window. And the cardinals, even though their juveniles were, I learned that the black beak means it's a juvenile, and they still fed their juveniles. Yeah. And it was so sweet.
Sure.
I was like, oh, that is so touching.
Yeah, you get that inside view into their life. You know?
Because every day they'd come, you know.
Yep.
So that's interesting. Yeah, the behavior does make it more interesting.
It really does, yeah. So that's been helpful, and just, you know, really trying very different lighting, different compositions, you know, really trying to just push myself. And to be honest, there's totally times when I do get bored with it. You know, I get bored with not so much the process, but I get bored with my own photography. You know, I just kind of went through a little bit of a rut with that when I was up in New Jersey, and there wasn't a lot. I was really working hard to get some stuff, and it wasn't panning out, and you know, I just felt like I was in a rut. And I'm looking, it's so easy, right? You look on social media and you see all this amazing stuff from all over the world, and it's like, my photography sucks. You know?
I know, believe me, I know.
Yeah,
but you know what? And you teach people too.
Yes.
I don't know if you teach them visually, or do you just
I teach them
in the
mostly
field?
In person.
Okay.
You know? Yeah, so out in the field.
Well, I have presentations, of course, and in my classes, I put all my bad pictures, because I always have these great ideas.
Sure.
Oh my God, it's going to be the coolest picture. Oh my God. And then you're like, oh my God, that is a horrible picture.
Yeah.
But I put them in my classes, not to show that I make mistakes, but to show, like, one idea I had, and you were a wedding photographer, I had this idea to have the bride and groom, like, go really fast in a circle.
Yeah.
And I was going to blur them like they were a little tornado.
Slower, yeah, nice.
Right at the middle of their aisle.
Yeah.
But they were going too slow. They wouldn't go fast because they were like kissing and I love you, blah, 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 you know? And it came out so stupid. Yeah. It looked just horrible, but it's such a good thing for the class when I'm teaching shutter speed, because everything else is sharp.
Yep.
Because I was on the tripod and it was at night and
Gotcha.
And I was at ISO 100 and it was pitch dark. And so they start to have a better understanding when they see my bad pictures.
But it's nice to try those things anyway, because sometimes those things do work out.
Sometimes they
And that's what, right? That's where a lot of the fun comes, is trying all these different things, and it's like, oh wow, this one worked out. 90% of the time it doesn't work out, you know, but when it does, then you got something different.
Now, for me, one of the reasons I'm not a bird photographer is I am not good at sitting still.
Yeah.
So that to me, like for me, if I'm bored, okay, for instance, we did a trip to Tuscany in September, and one of the ladies really wanted to buy some specialty ceramic thing. Okay. And she was in that store forever. Well, everybody else, I said, well, go ahead, you guys go and, you know, see the town and stuff, but I'll stay here and wait for her. Yeah. But the store was tiny, so I was standing outside for 45 minutes. Yeah. and it was like on a corner with nothing going on.
Gotcha.
And I just forced myself to think of creative things to take pictures.
Oh, nice.
And I started messing with the shutter speed. I started messing with the angles. I started messing.
Yeah.
And I didn't come up with anything outstanding, but I did. It was good exercise for me.
Work your creative brain.
But with a bird, you can't tell them what to do.
Correct.
So you just have to sit there?
So I have to learn their behavior.
Oh,
That's where
okay.
it really comes in. So birds, like all wildlife, are so habitual. They have very predictable, surprisingly, habits. You know, they like a favorite perch. They like a favorite food. They, rest in certain areas. They do this and that and this, And so spending more time with them, I learn that, and then I'm able to start predicting, Just last week, I was running a workshop over on the east coast of Florida, and we saw an eastern meadowlark singing up on the top of this fence post. And then another one comes and flies in and lands behind my car. We were shooting out of the car, using the car as kind of like a blind.
Okay.
And I said to the client with me, I said, let's watch this bird. So it flew back again, and then it returned to the same spot. So I hop out of my car, and I watch what was happening. I thought it was feeding, but no, it was gathering nesting material. But she was gathering nesting material from the same exact spot over and over again. So the next time she flew back to her nest, we jumped out of the car, got in position where the light was going to be good, and we just sat there and waited. And sure enough, she flies right to us, point blank, and we got to watch her and actually photograph her gathering all this nesting material. And she had so much in her beak, you couldn't even see through her face. I don't know how she was flying. She was like blind. There was so much stuff in her face. It was hilarious. But that little thing of being able to pick up on that behavior and watch that pattern happening, I was able to predict where she was going to be and make the move and get the client and myself a really good shot.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, let's talk about creativity, because everybody knows that. I mean, I don't know that much about bird photography, to tell you the truth. I know more than I know a lot,
Sure.
but I don't have practical experience.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mostly I know a lot because of the show.
Sure. Yeah.
And of
It's
course,
a popular thing down here.
and of course, Joe Fitzpatrick, who works here, he's a bird photographer,
Gotcha.
and he teaches bird photography.
Nice.
So I take a lot of classes and
Sure.
things, but I don't actually practice very much.
Okay.
So the flying birds are
Yeah, they're tough.
pretty much impossible for me.
Okay.
I just have never really mastered
Gotcha.
that.
Gotcha.
But the still birds, like what are the reddish egrets, how
Sure.
funny they are.
Yes.
And so
Yep.
I understand the behavior. A lot of bird photographers
Yes.
talk about that. I understand the light mostly at the back of your head or whatever, at your back, so that the bird is
Yep.
beautifully lit, hopefully,
Yeah.
unless it's at noon or something,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But how do you make it look different from somebody else's?
I start breaking some of those rules you just mentioned.
Ah.
Yeah, so that's the one thing that we all learn in the beginning with wildlife photography. Sun behind you, have it coming on the subject. And that was one of the first things I started to break, and it was really interesting. I learned it from my wedding photography. So my wife at the time took a class with a wedding photographer who was really creative and good with backlit. So having the main light source, usually the sun or a flash per se, behind the subject, and making a dramatic rim light, so you get that glow around the
Right.
subject, like a bride with the veil glowing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So she took a class with him and learned that, and we both got to kind of work together and grow that lighting technique for ourselves with our portrait photography, because with people you have a little bit more control.
Right.
Well, then
And
all of a
lights,
sudden,
you can bring lights.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then all of a sudden I realized I could start applying that to my bird photography.
Okay.
And I really got into backlighting birds. So, having them glowing. So I purposefully, very often now, will put the sun behind my subject.
Okay.
And try to get them glowing in that setting sun. Whereas everybody else, if I'm shooting with a group of people, they're all over here with the sun behind them.
Yeah.
I'm the one weirdo on the other way, shooting the other way. And it gives me something different.
Okay, so now for our people
Yes.
who are listening,
Yes.
how do you make it not be a silhouette?
So, great question. A silhouette is when the background is lighter than the subject behind it. So, if the bird is up on a perch against the sky and there's a pretty sunset sky behind it, it's a silhouette. As soon as I change my position and put a dark background behind that subject, so let's say some trees or shrubs in the background that are in shade because the sun is coming towards me, then the bird is against a dark background and it gets that glow around it.
Okay, so let me think this through. So the light is behind the tree, basically?
Yep. So the light, let's say the sun is over top of the tree, shining in, and then it hits the bird. But I place the bird against the background of the dark tree.
So you just move around until you see the right background.
That's correct. It's all about the background.
So you have to make sure that the bird's still glowing.
Yes.
Because if you move too much,
too much off axis,
you're not going to have the glow.
Correct.
Or the rim light is what we
Yep.
called it,
Yeah,
right?
totally. Yeah, the rim
Do
light.
we still call it as bird photography?
Yes.
Do we still call it rim lighting?
We did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's all about the background.
How hard is that to do, though? I mean,
It's difficult. Number one, it's hard to see sometimes. You got bright sun coming in the lens. Sometimes you have to deal with lens flare, which can be detrimental, but it can also be a real fun creative effect. Sometimes I get some really pretty lens flares, and it's kind of one of those things where I never know exactly what a lens flare is going to look like in the final photo until I see it on the computer, because I can see it through the lens, but it's not. I can't see exactly how it's going to look. So it's kind of like almost like a gamble of, well, I'm going to shoot some of these lens flares and see some of them may come out, and a lot of times they don't. It's hard to focus, It's definitely difficult to focus. So it presents a bunch of challenges. But
what do you do to focus?
I still use autofocus almost all the time.
So what do you do if you can't focus on the bird?
I find that rim light, that glow, I'll try to actually focus on that edge. That's a nice contrasty edge that the camera can pick up, So I try to find those areas to focus on and that sort of thing.
Now, are you shooting in manual?
Yes, when I'm shooting backlit like that and rim light, I'm full manual because
otherwise,
the camera has no idea what I'm trying to do at that point.
The camera thinks you're whacked.
Yeah, it really does. It's a real dark background. There's not much light in the scene. It's just that outline, that glow I'm trying to get, and sometimes I want to lighten the image a little bit so I can see more detail on my side of the bird. Other times I want to make it more dark and dramatic where I'm just getting the outline of the bird,
So where are you metering? Or depending on what you're doing, I guess.
Depending on what I'm doing,
So
I
walk
tend
us
to use,
through it, because we like to teach in this podcast.
I tend to use the overall metering just because I know...
And when you say overall?
On Nikon, it's called the Matrix. Yeah, the Matrix.
And Canon, I think it's evaluative. And Sony is multi.
Okay.
Multi-metering on Sony. Other ones I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Or
they all have their own name,
I probably have them in my presentation, but I don't have them memorized.
Gotcha, yeah. I like that just because it seems to be more forgiving for me, whereas spot metering is very accurate and precise, but if I move that spot just a little bit on, all of a sudden I hit the background or the bird, it's going to change a lot.
So the matrix metering meters the whole scene.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So it's not quite as drastic of change depending on what I'm pointing it at.
Okay.
And after, 10 years or more of shooting wildlife, I kind of just know what my camera's going to do. So that's where, honestly, a lot of my knowing how I want to expose the image just comes from experience. Knowing that when I point my camera at this scene with this stuff in it, how I want that photo to look, my meter's telling me this, I want to say, no, I want a stop under or a stop over. And
okay, so your meter, because of course I'm, my big class is teaching people to shoot in manual.
Yeah.
And I'm like, your meter on 0.
Yeah, correct.
Right? That means it's a good exposure.
Yep.
But you're saying when your meter doesn't really understand what to do because you're
something
crazy.
Very different.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
Then you have to still understand that your meter, what it's doing.
Yes. Very much. I use that meter.
You need to either say, oh, I need less light or more light.
Yep.
So, all right, let's say you're doing the backlit, rim-lit bird.
Yeah.
The rim-lit bird with the tree behind it.
Yep.
You're metering on the bird.
Correct.
Are you metering positive or negative?
Depends on the intensity of the light. It really does. And it depends on what I want to do. If I want to have some detail on my side of the subject, which is something that can happen, which is really neat. So when you introduce that dark background, you would think almost always it's going to be like a silhouette, But when you have that dark background, there's not a lot of bright, background light washing in over the bird. So you can actually expose that bird properly on your side of the light.
That's what I'm wondering
Yeah,
about.
you can, and see a ton of detail and still have a nice clean background.
So you're overexposing it a little bit?
I would a little bit at that point. I would tell the meter to go just a little bit over, or right around 0 is usually good for that. But if I want to get it really dramatic and just turn it into that kind of rim-lit glow and not too much detail, then I'm just going to push it under,
Okay, all right.
Yep. Yeah.
What else? What other cool things do you do?
Just definitely lighting is really important for me, you know, so just trying to find dramatic light, even if it's dramatic side light, you know, coming in strong from the side, I'll wait for the bird to turn its head into the light, and again, I really like dark backgrounds, so I'm always seeking, you know, trying to find something darker toned in the background. I kind of find like just blue sky backgrounds a little boring, they're not great for me, but that's just my taste, you know.
Right.
And so I'm always seeking out these darker backgrounds and looking for dramatic light hitting the subject, or maybe a background in shade or something like that.
So let's say you're going to work with side lighting.
Yeah.
Okay. So walk me through it. I couldn't think of a question.
Yeah. Yesterday I was doing just that. I had a snowy egret, so all white bird, and the background was in shade. And the sun was coming in kind of from the side from it. So I metered just on that bird. That was one of the times I did switch to spot metering, because I wanted that white bird to be exposed properly. I didn't want it to be overexposed.
Okay, and did you meter on 0?
Yes, yeah, meter on 0 on that. And I probably went just a touch darker because
white is easy to overexpose.
Exactly, yep, that's it. When you have direct sun on it, I just would rather have it a little bit underexposed and lighten it up in post than I would be overexposed. So I metered that way, and then I just waited for the bird to kind of turn its head into the light, you know? So it's very important to have light in the eyes for me. So I always want a nice catch light in the bird's eye, so if it turns its head just the wrong angle, I'm not getting that. And those are the little details I'm watching for. I'm like watching this bird wait for it to turn its head just into the light.
So you're metering on its head, not on the shady part of its body?
No, I would meter on the brighter part of the body. I did meter on the whole body, but where the sun was hitting it, the brightest part of it.
Okay.
Correct.
And but then underexposing a tiny bit, like half a stop?
Yeah, something like that would probably be pretty good. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just wait until it gives you that cool, and then you have the bright face, and then it kind of
fades off to the side,
onto
and then the
his
background
body.
is nothing but black because the background is totally in shade.
That's
it's just,
cool.
Yeah, it's just like, it looks like I put a little spotlight right on this bird, but it was all natural light, you know?
Oh, that is cool. All right, what else? So what other things about different types of lighting?
Other different types of lighting, I really like overcast light, you know, which is really surprising. A lot of bird photographers, especially in the Northeast where I'm from, they all say, you know, I hear it all the time on the weekend. You know, they only have the Saturday and Sunday to shoot, and they're like, oh, it's going to be cloudy all weekend. I can't go out and take any photos. And I'm like, you're missing out on some great stuff. So again, I think if you find a background that has tone in it, so, you know, trees, foliage, grass, anything that has some kind of tone, not just a white gray sky, overcast light can be really nice, you know? It allows you to shoot any direction. A lot of my songbird photography, which is that season's coming up soon. All the warblers are going to be coming up to the Northeast, and I work with them a lot. Photographing those birds in the forest in overcast light is great. We don't have shadows and hot spots coming in from the sun in the forest, from branches and leaves.
Soft light.
It's a beautiful soft light.
Kind of stuff we look for in portrait photography.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Same thing applies.
And you're doing portraits of birds.
Exactly. It really is. It's so interesting how it applies and how much of my portrait lighting and everything I have applied to my bird photography, you know. But then other than lighting, trying to get creative, the main thing I've been really trying to get is interesting foregrounds and backgrounds and compositions, you know. That's really where I really try to push things.
Are your backgrounds, when you talk about the trees, so the backgrounds would be really sharp, wouldn't they?
No, distance is the key there. So I'm shooting really shallow depth of field. I shoot a 500 millimeter f4 lens.
Okay.
And I shoot it almost exclusively at f4. So I shoot it wide open, so I have really shallow depth of field, which means I get a nice blur in my background.
Even if they're in a tree with the leaves not too far away from them?
As long as I'm close enough, yeah. And most of the time I'm trying to find them perched out on something where the tree is distant in the background, you know? Like that tree may be 200 yards behind them. It could be really far away.
But if you position yourself, you can figure out a way to get that bird behind the tree by moving yourself around to find that background. How much moving around are you doing? Aren't you scaring the bird?
Moving slow, lots of, sometimes I do, you know, sometimes I do.
That was the thing I told you my first time seeing those glossy ibises. I couldn't get close. I just had my cell phone with me because I was doing my power walk. And I couldn't get anywhere near them. As soon as I would start crawling, you know, slowly going towards the water, boom, they were gone.
Yeah, definitely. And that happens sometimes, but again, that goes back to the bird behavior. Watching and learning that bird behavior, being able to read their body language, see if they're comfortable or not, if I'm moving in too quick or not, you know.
That's true. You know, I remember that from one time I was out with Joe Fitzpatrick, and he said, just wait, they'll come back. And they did.
Sure.
Exactly the same spot and everything.
Very predictable.
So, he knows, but it's interesting. That's so cool. All right, so you have a shallow depth of field on almost everything.
Yes.
And that is caused not just from your aperture, but also from that
Distance.
How heavy is that lens?
It's heavy. Yeah, I think the whole setup is probably like 8 or 9 pounds, so it doesn't sound that much, but you know, when you're holding it up like that, it can be.
You know how I know that that's a lot of weight? Not from my camera gear.
Okay.
I, have been, in the summers, I've been traveling more. I learned how to home swap.
Okay.
So I can go cool places for next to no money now.
Excellent.
So I go for long periods of time because we have no business here in the summer.
Okay.
So I bought a laptop for travel because I still have to run my business.
Sure.
And I thought, God, this laptop is heavy, even though I had, plus I had camera gear in the backpack too. But so I thought I have to get a lighter laptop. So last year I bought a Surface Pro.
Okay.
Which is a little over 2 pounds.
Okay. Yeah.
So then I went to see how much my other one was.
Yeah.
It was only 4. I was like, it's only it's not even 2 pounds heavier, but it felt like a million pounds.
Yeah, when you're holding stuff up like that.
So 8 to 9 pounds. Yeah. That sounds heavy.
It is, yeah.
So what do you have? You've got your tripod?
Never use a tripod.
You never use
Almost
a tripod?
Never. Monopod. I find a tripod very cumbersome because I like to make very quick, minute adjustments, left, right, up, down, and from the monopod I can do that all really quickly while keeping my eye in the viewfinder and still using that to support the weight of everything.
And how fast does your shutter speed have to be?
Surprisingly low. Like I've shot birds consistently at 200th of a second. Yeah.
At 500 millimeters?
Yep. Yeah, the stabilization on these lenses is really good now, and with just some good solid technique,
Are you Nikon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Nikon,
wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty
that's one of the
amazing.
things I teach. I think there's a misconception that you need a lot higher shutter speeds than you actually do. Now that being said, I'm certainly not stopping action when that's happening. This is a bird that's sitting relatively still.
Yeah.
It's not, if it's bouncing all over the place and everything, those shutter speeds aren't going to cut it, But even songbirds and warblers that do bounce all over the place, whenever they hit a perch, they're rock solid for that split second, and you can still get sharp photos at these lower shutter speeds.
That is something else.
Yeah.
Now, do you, we did a review on the Wimberley Mono Gimbal head. Have you seen that?
I saw that, yeah. It looks really nice. I haven't tried it yet, but it does look really nice, yeah.
We love that thing.
Yeah.
So, Heather will put a link
yes.
to our review.
Yeah.
And, but we really like that. You would like it.
It seems really good, yeah.
Are you just using, what kind of head?
I just have like a tilt head on it,
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't need to rotate because it's just a stick, so the whole thing just rotates naturally.
That's fascinating to me. See, now that makes me more interested in bird photography already.
Yeah.
Because I don't like carrying all that heavy stuff.
Tripod is
It's
cumbersome.
going to be heavy with the, no matter what the lens.
There's some of these manufacturers making much lighter lenses though.
That's what's happening. Everybody's like, you ready to switch to mirrorless? I'm like, not yet. I'm waiting for the weight to go down. That's what I'm waiting for.
Certainly.
I mean, as I get older, things get heavier. Now, you started wedding photography around the same time I did.
Yeah.
And everybody, it was like you get the 24 to 70 2.8, and you get the 70 to 200 2.8.
Yeah.
Those were the two lenses. Everybody got those. That's what I had. I had them for years. But then after a while, when I got to be like in my 50s, that 70 to 200 2.8, I could barely even pick it up. I had to get rid of it.
Especially when you're holding it like 10 hours a day or whatever, strapped on.
People don't realize that we have two cameras hanging off of us for many, many hours.
I switched to the belt system eventually. It was so nice having the weight like on the holster kind of thing because my shoulders just couldn't take
I tried that, but well, I mean, this is not wedding photography show, but I'll tell you what the problem was is because we shoot right into the bright sun because everybody gets married at the beach.
Sure.
We have to be by the front row, crouched down in the sand.
Yeah.
And then when you stand up, you take the picture, you get right back down so you're not in anybody's way.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So that if you're hanging with the big lenses, wouldn't they be in the sand?
No, the holster actually pointed the 70 to 200 backwards.
Oh, I must have been doing it wrong.
Yeah, it pointed it straight back actually, so I was still able to crouch and get low with it. Yeah, it worked out well. So.
All right, so we talked about shallow depth of field. We talked about. I'm fascinated with the monopod. That's awesome. That's such a great tip for a lot of people, I would imagine. Yeah. Although it also would get tiring, though. I mean, what if you're sitting there waiting for a bird to change their behavior? Then you got to hold the camera up the whole time. Where on a tripod,
you can just let it go.
You can even get a seat.
So when I am shooting hide photography, when I'm going to be stationed and really just patiently waiting for something.
What did you call that?
Being in a hide. like a blind.
Oh, hide.
Yes, hide.
Okay,
yep.
sorry.
That's okay. When I'm doing that, then I will use a tripod. That's one of the few times where I'm going to sit here, I'm not going to move, I'm waiting for a bird to land on a specific perch or do something right here. I might as well, because I don't need to be moving quickly and making adjustments.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I'll use is when I'm shooting shorebirds, so the tiny birds, anything on the ground or water level, so waterfowl, shorebirds, that kind of stuff. Then I use what's called a ground pod, which is basically like an upside down frisbee and a pan tilt head mounted to it. And it just kind of balances it really low, gives you that low perspective, because that's where I like to shoot. Anything that's low, I'm going to be eye level with it.
You're down there.
I'm down there.
You're down the belly.
Yep. Yep. Army crawling all over the place. Yeah. My knees are all scraped up from crawling around the beach yesterday. Yeah.
Oh, we have such soft sand here, though.
I found shells, apparently. Yeah.
I was going to say, our sand is like
the sand is
silk,
nice. Yes.
but
yes.
shells, shells are tough.
Yeah.
And we have, like, especially if you go to Sanibel, oh my God, there's so many shells on that beach.
That's where I was, yeah.
Oh, is that where you were?
Well, I ended up there, yeah. I started
yeah.
out on Bunch Beach, but yeah.
Sanibel's probably where you got scraped up.
Yeah, it may have been.
Maybe. All right, so let's just let me talk about this already. So we did the shallow depth of field is one way to look at the backlight is another way. The side light is another way.
Yep.
Anything else that you can think of that you do?
Foregrounds and backgrounds are really important.
Oh, you started to say that. I interrupted you,
Yeah, no,
didn't
that's
I?
okay. The foreground thing is something that I've really done a lot of lately that I think a lot of people take a while to get into. And there's a lot of other bird photographers doing it as well. But actually purposefully placing stuff between you and your subject.
Like what?
And shooting through that. So grass in the foreground.
So you get down on your belly again?
Down on the belly, yep. Yeah, if I'm shooting birds on the ground, really just placing some stuff in the foreground. If I'm shooting in the forest, finding leaves and branches to shoot through. It creates like this tunnel effect, where all the foreground is out of focus, and then all of a sudden just your subject's in focus, and then the background's out of focus kind of thing. So it creates this foreground of obstruction that you can actually use to create something creative.
Right, give some interest.
Yeah, some depth.
And that one
to the
is what I
photo.
learned in wedding photography.
Yeah.
Did you learn that in wedding photography?
I did, actually, yeah.
We used to take
Start
like
doing the same
chairs,
stuff.
how the chairs would have like the little wire backgrounds or something and shoot through the chairs so you'd get these cool little frames.
Yeah, exactly.
But they would be all blurry so you couldn't tell what they were.
Yep. That's the exact same concept.
Yeah, I know I've done that with leaves, but I didn't, of course I'm not a big bird photographer. I'm not a big wildlife photographer.
Okay.
I think you have to be a little more patient than I am.
Patience is huge.
Wildlife photography.
Is huge, yeah.
I love to get out there, but I do landscapes and macro because those are, you could take those pictures and then move.
Yeah, yeah,
You
definitely.
don't have to sit there. I'm not good at sitting. But I do.
I'll count.
I'm interested though. I mean, I have a bird feeder. Obviously, I love birds.
That's a great way to.
And of course, here, I have painted buntings.
Yeah, I know.
But only this year, I don't even think I've seen Mr. Painted Bunting this year.
Okay.
Maybe once.
Gotcha. They're beautiful.
He's kind of a whore, I think, because I have several females.
Sure.
So where is he going all the time?
A lot of birds are that way. They'll make their rounds.
Yeah, but I have at least 3 regular female painted buntings.
Which are pretty in their own right. Yeah, that bright green.
I didn't know what they were for the longest time. And I couldn't find it on the internet because I'm not a bird. I finally put it on Facebook, and then
that's the way to do it.
1,000
instantly.
Bird photographer friends. I don't know why I didn't think of that in the first place. So
that's great.
What about? Hold on, I can't think of the name for it. The things that shoot the light.
Oh, a flash, like the better beamers?
Better beamer.
Yeah. I don't use any flash photography in my bird photography. No.
Oh, interesting.
I don't have a problem with it. I just personally don't.
It's not your thing.
It's not my thing. Yeah. I mean, I know how to use flashes really well from wedding photography.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I used to be using 3, 4 flash setups, and I know it really well. But I've just never found a need for it with the way I shoot. I'd much rather, I just prefer to use the natural light and find an interesting way to do that. But I know a bunch of people that I have good friends that use it and do well with it. So I guess my only suggestion would be to make it look not flashed with bird photography, try to make it look natural. Minimal power, so just use it for like a light fill flash kind of thing. I think that's when I've seen it look the best. When it's obviously flashed, I just don't personally think it's ever very flattering. It's the same thing as wedding, like a straight, just full-on flash on the subject is not necessarily great. You want to mix it and make it look natural or put it off axis kind of thing,
One of the things I teach in flash photography is you have to shoot in the manual mode.
Oh yeah.
Because then you can avoid that flashy look by, making sure your meter, your background is
where you want it.
Is not too dark or whatever, so the flash won't be too powerful or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
So it's been a long time, and I have an article somewhere. Heather, you can dig it up. Poor Heather has to do everything.
She's got a checklist now.
I know. Anyway, but I got a better Beamer, and it was the first time I ever used it.
Sure.
And we did a photo walk at the dog beach.
Okay.
And I couldn't believe how far that thing could shoot light.
Sure.
I was shooting at sunset, so against the sun.
Yeah.
And of course, I was just shocked at how much light. So I had to turn my flash down.
Correct.
I couldn't believe how far it could shoot.
Yeah, it really concentrates.
But then I started using it in portrait photography a little bit because, sometimes you want the people really far away.
Yeah, nice.
That thing, man,
I never thought of that.
Shoots it. Joe got a mag mod, which is similar, and that's easier to use than a better Beamer.
Yeah, just pop on and off.
It's a little more expensive, but it's easier to use.
It's a nice setup. Yeah.
I mean, the better Beamer is easy to use once you get it on, but getting it on is a pain in the butt.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So now, do you see? You said that it's hard to see, like especially the backlight stuff or the lens flare.
Yeah. Yep.
The lens flare. I have a story about that too.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you learned photography or got involved in photography the same time as I did in wedding photography.
Yeah.
And my training was that you didn't overexpose the backgrounds. You learned to use lighting so that you could balance the backgrounds. So you never had those white skies.
Correct.
And lens flare meant you were an idiot.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden I'm seeing all this people with lens flare in their pictures. I'm like, first I couldn't stand it, right?
Yeah.
But then I started kind of learning to like it a little bit, and then I started learning to use it.
Yeah.
And you can make your whole subject like have this orange glow to it with lens flare. And I'm just thinking in bird photography, that might be really cool.
Same exact concept. Yep.
So
you described it perfectly.
But it's hard. It's hard to achieve
It's got to be just right. Yep. Yeah, and then just like with the wedding photography, I feel like you gotta worry not to use it as a crutch, right? Because then all of a sudden you're just doing it all the time, and that's all you're shooting, right? It's like variety is key there. So, I find myself, I love that backlit rimlet look, but I have to constantly tell myself, like, all right, Ray, you've done enough of that. Yeah. Let's move around. Let's shoot some front light or side, or just mix it up. Just so I'm not shooting the same thing over and over again,
And that is really good advice.
Yeah. In any photography.
Yeah,
mix it up.
I went to the lab. We have a couple local labs here. I mean, most. Anyway, I went one time to talk to Mary Lou, and she was putting a book together for somebody who had been to Africa.
Okay.
And I started thumbing through the book, and there were like 40 pictures of the same lion in the same pose. I was like, oh my God, this woman is paying a fortune for this book. They all look the same.
A little variety.
It's like, no, you have to mix it up.
Sure.
Plus it helps you keep
fresh.
Yeah. You don't get bored with your stuff.
Correct. Yep.
And
totally.
Like you said, 90% of the time, some of these creative things that you try don't come out.
Yeah.
But you got to try them.
Totally.
Because sometimes they come out cool.
Yeah. And then you have a new tool in the toolbox to use. And
sometimes you have no idea.
Yeah. Sometimes it's accidental.
And you're like, oh my God.
Sure.
Look at this.
Yep.
This came out so cool.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, how much editing do you do?
So
we already know you're good at Photoshop.
Yes. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So my goal and intention with editing my bird photography is I want it to look as close to what I saw there, so as close to reality. I try not to edit these photos to look completely different than what it looked like when I shot. But that being said, I have no problem removing distractions. So I will clone out, a branch that's in the way or a leaf or a piece of grass or something like that if I find it kind of just distracting to the overall photo. Some wildlife photographers are very strictly like, just leave it as is, you don't touch and remove anything, and I totally respect that, but I want to just present my audience with a beautiful photo, and sometimes there's a distracting element in there that there was nothing I could do to get rid of.
And Joe has a class on composition.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, it's like, what did we do? What can we do to make this a better picture?
Sure.
And he cloned out a whole bunch of branches on an osprey once, and it looked fabulous. It just simplified the picture.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
Oh, and he also clone the tail feather back in.
Nice.
One of them was cut
Yeah,
off.
yeah. Nice.
I'm sure Joe didn't take it like that because he's so freaking good photographer, but he probably did it for the class, you know?
Yeah.
But you can do that kind of
You
stuff.
can, yeah. And I think the appropriate thing to do when you're sharing, if you're sharing online with social media and stuff, is, I don't disclose when I've removed like the tiniest little thing. It didn't really make a big difference. But if I really changed that photo, if there was a huge branch going through and I removed that, or another big bird that was like next to it that I didn't want in there, I disclose that. I think that's the appropriate thing to do, to not mislead people to think like you took this amazing photo and that's how it was, because that's what everybody assumes. When you see wildlife photography, you assume like, oh, that was how it was captured. But if I did a dramatic change in the computer, I think it's honest to disclose that to your viewers. It doesn't mean you have to tell them every little edit you've done, but when it's a big change, I think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, interesting.
So that's kind of my approach with that.
Now, one thing I forgot to ask, because I did look at your pictures, but of course this is a podcast, so people can't see your pictures.
Yes.
You're shooting all close-ups?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I've become known for small in frame, birds tiny in the frame, actually. So that was one of the things that, again, I learned from wedding photography. I started really playing around with compositions that had a lot more of the actual scenery. And so for the bird photography, the reason I like that is when you shoot a close-up of a bird, it's great, we see all this beautiful detail and everything, but it doesn't tell the story of that bird at all. Where it is, where it lives, what kind of habitat it's in, what that location is like. We're just seeing a close-up detailed bird, blurred background, nothing else. Well, when you back up and include a lot more of that habitat, to me, it tells a little bit more of the story of that bird, where it is, its habitat, what it lives in, and I think that can be a little bit more compelling as a storytelling photo. And I've also found it a lot more challenging because now all of a sudden there's a lot more stuff in the frame that has to work
cluttered.
together.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's so easy for a bird photo like that to look cluttered.
Especially because you're putting branches and things behind things.
Correct. Yeah, branches behind things. So
well, how big are we talking in the picture? Like 3/4 of the picture, 1/4 of the picture?
Probably 1/4 or less sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, most...
So it's not tiny, but it's big enough to see it.
It's big enough to see it. Well, that's the other challenge, right? So the challenge is to have this bird small in the frame and yet still make that bird the main subject of the image.
Yeah.
And then everything else kind of secondary and complementing it and adding to that photo. And that's what I've kind of become known for,
Yeah, because that's very unique.
It is.
Most people do kind of close-ups.
Everybody, and that was what I think, that's the normal growth pattern of any bird photographer. Because in the beginning, the hardest thing to do is to learn how to get close to these birds. Because they fly, they so easily get away.
Right.
And so I still do it every once in a while, but in the beginning, all I was thinking was, let me get close, let me get close, let me get close. And then once I learned how to get good at getting close, it's like, okay, I have that down, now what? Then for me, it became, let me back up.
Okay.
And there's actually times where I will kind of work my way in and get close-up photos of a bird and say, okay, now it's time. I'll actually physically back up and put more space in the image and try to find an interesting composition, really offset the bird, place it in a bottom corner, a lot of pretty foreground, background, interesting colors,
That's a huge challenge because you have a subject that you can't control.
Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm
Make
impressed.
it even more challenging. Yep.
Now, do you travel where the birds are? I mean, obviously you're here in Florida and you live in New Jersey, so you travel somewhat anyway.
Yeah, somewhat, yeah. I don't travel as much as I would like, of course, but hoping that will continue to grow as far as the traveling goes. But right now, I got to say, New Jersey is a great area for birds, especially seasonally. We have the seasonal change, which helps keep everything fresh. It's about a 3-month period, 3 or 4 months that you have. You get the winter birds. Then they leave, spring stuff arrives, then summer nesting, and then fall things start trying to leave, and winter birds start showing up again. So we get a good variety of change in that area, so it keeps things fresh throughout the year.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I started this show because I realized that all of the, not just bird photographers, but all the nature photographers, they all come to Florida in the winter.
Sure.
So I was like, I have access to all of these great photographers. How can I take advantage of this? I didn't want to start a podcast because you know what a podcast is? A lot of work.
It is.
You have a podcast.
I do.
You know.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't have time, but here I am. 3.5 years. 3.5 years?
Impressive.
Oh,
Impressive.
Geez,
I know.
Believe it.
Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, All right, so final tips. Let's summarize one more time because we talked about, or did I miss anything?
I think that's good.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we talked about shallow depth of field.
Sure.
We talked about the monopod, which I was fascinated by the way.
Yes. Yeah.
Backlight, side light, silhouette was kind of like backlight, but not always silhouette on the
Correct.
backlight.
Yeah, mixing it up. Yeah.
Side light.
Foregrounds, backgrounds are really interesting.
Backgrounds.
Yeah, very important to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, that's one of the things
That's
that I think
a really cool
in the
idea.
beginning people overlook so much. It's like, what is in that background? You have to. It took me a while to really train myself to see past my subject. You know, it's the same thing in portrait photography. You
In
know,
any
it
kind
really
of
is.
photography,
Yeah.
you gotta pay attention.
know?
It's so hard for us because we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
Joe has a really funny picture in his composition class because I was with him when he took the picture, but I kind of ditched him. I felt bad because this guy. We went to a Civil War. I think it was Civil War reenactment, and the guy latched on to Joe.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
so I sort of wandered off.
Yeah.
Not very nice, but I did it.
You're on your own, buddy.
The guy, exactly. So the guy was pulling out the flag to show him.
Okay.
So he had his arm up holding the flag up, and Joe took a picture, you know, of the guy holding up the flag.
Yeah.
And then you look at the picture later, and there's another arm of somebody pointing to something. It looks like it's coming out of the
got a third
guy. It
arm.
looks like
Yeah.
he's got 3 arms. It's
Yeah.
so funny. But Joe, as much
You don't-
experience as Joe has,
Yeah.
he didn't notice that. So we all have to work on our backgrounds
Sure.
at
Yeah.
all times.
Correct. Yeah.
But it's a little different. That was just to not have a bad background.
Yeah.
To have a good background, you have to move around
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, and it's really.
Often.
I plan that as soon as I see my subject. That's the probably first or second thing, you know. So it was like, all right, what's the light? How do I want to shoot this? And now, what do I want my foreground and background to be? You know, like I instantly start thinking that and trying to move myself into position to make that happen. Because without those things, then it's just another snapshot, you know. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now this is going to air in mid-April.
Okay.
So what projects do you have coming up after that?
After April, let's see, mid-April is going to be, for me, I go back to Jersey and it's going to be warbler season, which is great. So these tiny, beautiful songbirds migrate up from the tropics and down this way up to New Jersey and further north to nest. And a lot of the different species actually nest in New Jersey. So I'll be running a bunch of workshops with these warblers, which are amazing birds. It's probably my busiest time of year. That's what most people come to work with me with, actually, is with these warblers.
Okay.
Yeah, which has been a blast. So New Jersey's a great area for a lot of variety of
Where
them.
in New Jersey are you?
Southern, I'm just outside of Philadelphia in New Jersey, but there's a whole bunch of certain species that nest in the southern part of the state, and then kind of a different group of them that nest in the northern part of the state. So I'm running tours both northern and southern New Jersey to work with all these warblers, and then I'll be photographing loons up in New Hampshire in the summer, which is going to be really exciting. Yeah, and then I'm in the talking stages to go and work with a friend up in Newfoundland, Canada, over the summer to do some birding up there. So
They have puffins up there or something?
he does have some puffins, but gannets are the main thing. I'm going for the northern gannet. Yeah. So
And what time of year?
that I'm not sure when I'm going to get up there, but I'm
cold
thinking
up there, you
around
know.
August is probably when I'll be getting up there. Yeah,
You won't
so.
see me going to Canada in the winter.
Not for you. Yeah.
No. I do not.
You got that Florida blood. Yeah.
I've been in Florida most of my life,
Yeah.
and my blood has thinned out.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Now, what's your website? Where can we find you?
RayHennessy.com.
RayHennessy.com?
Simple.
Get that.
Yep. Yeah. Easy.
got it
It's Hennessy. Yeah.
Sounds to me
And
like
so-
that would have been a hard one to get.
No, yeah, surprisingly the Ray part worked out, I guess, you know. I post a new photo on there every single day
On your website,
on my website, yeah.
not on your social media.
And sometimes, mostly on my social media as well, on Instagram. I usually post the photo there, but not every single day. But I always
your
encourage people
website.
to go to my website because, listen, I love Instagram as far as the exposure you get and how big that community is, but these photos are so beautiful on this big screen. I edit them on a 27-inch iMac. And then you look at them on this phone, this tiny little thing.
Yeah.
And especially the way I like to shoot with the bird smaller in the frame, you don't get to see all the detail that's there.
Yeah.
Whereas on my website, you get to see it full screen. It looks
And
really
it's
nice.
a smart business move on your part too, because
You never know what's going to happen with these social media things.
yeah,
They
that could be
disappear.
gone tomorrow.
Exactly. Yep.
And you're getting them to your website.
Yeah.
Smart man.
Yeah.
Smart business. I like
Plus,
that.
I got to say, I also share a ton of stuff on there. I share editing videos, some behind the scenes of me shooting. The podcast is all on the website. Like everything I do is all on the website. All my workshops, I have frequently asked questions that people ask me all the time. There's answers to that. Just all kinds of stuff. I have a lot of content there. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And tell us the name of your podcast again.
The podcast is Wildlife Photo Chat. It's me and my friend Ray, two Rays, host the show, which is hilarious. Nobody ever knows who they're talking to.
Oh my gosh. Is his voice real different from yours?
It is different enough, yes.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, me and Ray host the show. We try to do it weekly, but right now I'm down here working a lot, so it's not real consistent. But we've interviewed wildlife photographers, mainly bird photographers, but some wildlife photographers from all over the world already. We've had a couple people from Australia, Sweden, the UK, Alaska, Canada, just all over. And we bring them on to talk about how they are approaching photography creatively. Like that's the main thing we're trying to push with that. Yeah, so it's been a lot of fun. So yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
I appreciate it, especially you coming in. We
great
like
to
to do
chat.
it here.
Yeah.
It's much
Yeah,
nicer
it's nice.
for us. We know
Yeah.
it's going to work.
Sure. Yeah, you never know what they're in with the computer stuff. Yeah. Yep. I know what you're talking about.
Yep, I bet you do. All right, and thank you to our audience. Thank you so much for joining us on the Understand Photography show. Again, those reviews on iTunes help us more than anything. And Heather puts a link right in the show notes. The show notes are on understandphotography.com. So right from there, you can click and leave a review on iTunes for us. Really, really appreciate it. I'm Peggy Farren. Thanks for watching the Understand Photography show.
Get up!